Street Fighter IV is where I was first introduced into the series. That intro sequence is something that I will never forget to this day. The music and the watercolor animation just puts you in this trance, getting you absolutely pumped to start up the game and start inputting these shoryukens on enemy chins. Then the second half, just about the manliest of manly intros you'll ever see. I knew what a time I would be in for every time I started up the game, and I'm sure a lot of you down in the comments can resonate with those same feelings. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for Street Fighter V. My god, if there was ever a game with insane potential that was ruined by greed, it's that game. And I say it's a shame because the core gameplay is still pretty good, outside of fireballs just being absolutely insane in this game. But the graphics are still as beautiful and stylized as ever, the animations flow seamlessly together, but all of that is marred by the absolutely trash launch that this game had. Single player? That straight up didn't exist when Street Fighter V released. No arcade mode either. The character roster was absolutely abysmal, with only 16 characters available at launch. And even now, there are so many different editions of this game that it feels confusing as to what you want to actually buy, because of how many updates they needed to do to make Street Fighter V the game it should have been to begin with. You got Street Fighter V Arcade Edition, so okay, what does that include? Does that include the arcade mode that should have been in the game at launch and that's all I get? Or do I get extra characters and stages? But oh no, I think for the extra characters and stages, you want to get the Champion Edition, because that one nets you 40 characters and 34 stages. Oh, okay, cool, right? But even that edition doesn't actually give you every single character on the roster, since there's actually 46 characters total. Does this sound insane enough yet? Compared to Ultra Street Fighter IV, which is currently $8 on Steam now, by the way, this was just a slap in the face by Capcom to its fans. I honestly think the terrible launch marred what is otherwise a pretty solid entry. And even to this day, the game's reputation is still mostly in the dirt because of what the fans experienced at launch. The only saving grace here that I can kind of defend this game with is at least now you can buy all the characters and stages with in-game currency that you earn, but even that is so slow going that it's almost not even an option. I've put in 60 hours into Street Fighter V and I'm still 20,000 points away from getting my first DLC character. So basically, pay up if you want the extra characters and stages that they should have released to begin with. Not to mention, while the core gameplay mechanics were still pretty fun to mess around with, I think the game took a step backwards when compared to Street Fighter IV's mechanics. Now, I'm no Street Fighter pro by any means, but I think we can all agree that focus attacks were the bomb.com, yo. And them trading that for V-triggers in 5 was lame as hell, in my opinion. It threw off balance entirely, since one character's V-trigger could be 10 times better than someone else's, where with Street Fighter IV, every single character had access to focus attacks. It may have been simplistic, but it worked really well. I was a Ryu main because, come on, how can you not think Ryu is one hunky, chunky, hubba-bubba... Excuse me. I'm not sure if they finally buffed Ryu's V-trigger yet, but I remember getting my ass handed to me anytime someone popped a V-trigger against me, and I just did not get to hand their ass back to them the same way. Hell, Daigo Umehara, a die-hard Ryu main, ended up needing to drop him because of how bad he was in Street Fighter V. So bad! So bad! Oh. How you gonna do Ryu like that, Capcom? That's messed up. In Street Fighter IV, everyone had focus attacks. That was the standard. The main difference between the characters in 4 was in how each executed their combos, their supers, things like that. And while Street Fighter V still has some variety in its combos here and there, A lot of the battles, I feel, are decided by how good your V-trigger is. That's another thing, comeback mechanics. Not a big fan of them within fighting games, and Street Fighter 4 was kind of guilty of it too. You don't have your V-trigger right off the bat in Street Fighter 5. How do you get it? By taking damage. So then if you're getting your ass beat by a skilled player, you can just use V-trigger to make a comeback. To be fair, the same goes for the other player, but a lot of people view it as a backward system, me included, since you get rewarded for losing. And not only that, V-trigger can be used to get out of a sticky situation, where if you perform an attack that's blocked that should leave you wide open to retaliation, well, nope, you can just V-trigger your ass on out of there, because the trigger gives you back those lost frames. Not a good time for the person blocking, that's for sure. Alright, that's enough Street Fighter V slander. I know you're all thinking, isn't this video supposed to be about Street Fighter 6? Well, all that I've said above was to get to this point. Before we even get to the gameplay, let's just talk about the character roster alone. Right now, it seems like there will be 22 Street Fighter 6 characters in the roster at launch, 4 confirmed by Capcom and the rest revealed by leaked character art. So take this with a grain of salt, but if they release all those characters at launch behind absolutely no paywalls, I'll be a very happy man, especially considering that there's plenty of characters for them to recycle here. That's already much better than the measly 16 they had for Street Fighter V's launch. They also need to make sure there's a lot to keep players occupied when they launch 6 this time around. Make sure arcade mode is there to play off the rip, and please, for God's sakes, an actual decent story mode as well. Street Fighter V story mode, first of all, it wasn't there to begin with, and then when they finally added it, it was garbage. Listen, I know fighting game fans don't typically care much for story, but I'm telling you, us casual players do. Tekken 7 story mode, banging like a biscuit, I love that shit. Now, they don't need to go that far, but please, do something similar. Now, for the main reason why I think Street Fighter 6 will be more successful than Street Fighter 5, and personally, I think it will be due to the changes in the combat system. Gone completely are things like V-triggers, ultra specials rewarded because of damage, nah, none of that gimmicky stuff. In Street Fighter 6, you get by based off skill alone. No V-triggers to get you out of a sticky situation or to rely on when you're getting your ass handed to you. But that doesn't mean Capcom doesn't have a trick up their sleeve. Introducing the drive gauge. All characters in Street Fighter 6 will have access to the 5 different mechanics available from the drive gauge, with one of those mechanics being Drive Impact. Drive Impact is basically what a focus attack is from Street Fighter 6. Oh, they brought that shit back, baby! Woo! Honestly, I'm just so glad that they brought something similar to focus attacks, because those were so awesome to use in Street Fighter 4 and something I feel they should have never gotten rid of. There's also drive parries, overdrives, and drive rush, all of which use up varying amounts of your drive gauge. The gauge will refill slowly throughout the battle, regardless of how much damage you take, so there's a lot of risk-reward here within the combat. Do you want to go all out on the offensive with your drive gauge to completely overwhelm the enemy? Or do you want to go on the defense, slowly whittling your enemy down with parries and drive impacts as you make sure your gauge doesn't go too low? The options here are endless, and with every character having access to all of these moves from the drive gauge, it makes it so that a balancing act will be much more feasible with Street Fighter 6 than it was with Street Fighter 5, very much like how focus attacks were a balancing act in Street Fighter 4. That's not to mention how the graphics this time around and the stylistic choices in the environments and how the hits look and feel impactful all combine to make the game actually feel like a street fight. Street Fighter hasn't felt like a bare-bone, ass-to-grass street fight in such a long time, but 6 finally seems to be an exception to that rule. I hope I'm not getting hyped up for no reason. I'm definitely going to temper my expectations, but for those reasons and more, I truly do believe that Street Fighter 6 will outshine Street Fighter 5 when it comes to its launch, and even surviving as a true fighting game classic in its own right. I just really hope Capcom learned its lesson with Street Fighter 5 and did not hold anything back when releasing your game. You want to surprise people the first day the game comes out, not months down the line when everyone's forgotten and moved on to other things. If Capcom executes this right, it'll be one for the ages. With that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to like and subscribe, or Street Fighter 6 is going to turn out like Street Fighter 5.